Good evening, good morning, welcome to week 4 of PSHS 6240 here at George Washington University. Just want to review again week 3 or start off with a couple of announcements. I think we had a good WebEx session on Thursday. Thank you for Group 1 for doing a pretty good job. And you will, Group 2, you're in the shoot for not this coming Thursday, but the next Thursday as well. So I think the technology went okay. I think everyone had a good interaction and good questions, and I look forward to Group 2's presentation. What I'm also going to do for Group 3, or the third week, or third WebEx session that we have in 3 weeks, is I'm going to do a job talk, which means I'm going to talk careers in the defense industry, intelligence community, in the federal government, and I'd ask that you, if you have questions, well, one, if you have issues, please come to that session, and if you have questions, let me know ahead of time, because I'm sure many of your other fellow students have that. So we're going to do that in week 7, a few weeks from now. So we'll do for that WebEx session, we'll do the Group 3 and a job talk as well. So paper one is due. Didn't get any word on extensions, so depending on when you're watching this, it's due Sunday, 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. So please get your paper in. DC session. So I know a couple of people here live in DC area. The one thing I always just say is, it might not be a bad idea to drop in on a class when you're in this program that's meeting in person in the DC area. I've taught in person and online. There's advantages for online. There's advantages for in person as well. So there's a DC session. Make sure you, if you're interested in one of your future classes, it might not be a bad idea to drop in and see how it is. And you might want to take the class in person. And then current events. So I don't want to get, again, political here, but a lot of the FBI issues that have come up in the last week or so. I don't want to get political here, but I'm a senior federal official. I'm a federal official. As you go more senior, you got to watch what you text, what you put on your Facebook, even what you email to other people. As you get senior, you get more political. No matter whether you're in the FBI or at Homeland Security or anything like that. So your Facebook posts now could come back to haunt you 10, 15 years down the line. And I'm just alluding to those text messages sent between those two FBI agents. Whether you think they're bad or not, I'll let you decide. But the simple fact is that things you put in emails, on social media, on your LinkedIn, all those types of issues can come back to get you. And that's all I'll say about that. So week 3 review. Great discussion on road to 9/11. Close versus short term, or long versus short term. And I really wanted to emphasize that piece. Again, the Zakaria really, he says it pretty well in his article. We can look at history, we can look at crusades, we can look at all those things, but really the road to 9/11 starts with the 6-Day War in 1967. The video, the Road to 9/11 video, says, you got to look back at the Crusades, you got to look back at the colonial period, the Mandate period, and make a decision from there. Just give my personal opinion, I kind of fall along the Zakaria side. I think you can't, and I look at this from a social science perspective. Yes, in the Road to 9/11, they talk about colonial, the Mandate period after World War I, and how the Middle East was carved up. But a lot of countries were carved up. Certainly in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, there was a lot of countries that were arbitrarily carved up. Korea was arbitrarily carved up. Indochina was arbitrarily carved up. India and Pakistan arbitrarily carved up. So you have a lot of countries out there, but you didn't have them celebrating on 9/11. You didn't have them facilitating 9/11. A lot of countries were negatively impacted by colonialism. So again, I go along with the Zakaria kind of thesis that he lays out, and we're going to revisit that in a later section. But I do believe that you have to start really in the 6 Day War, and then that timeline in the 1979, and that brings you to 9/11, and that anger that was, again, it's not just the 9/11 attacks, but that anger that was directed at the United States even before the Iraq War and Afghanistan wars, that was very omnipresent. As a side note, there's a great book out there called The Looming Tower, which covers this in a longer form, and it covers Islamic extremism and Saeed Qutb, and covers the intelligence failure that we're going to talk about in a later topic that goes up to 9/11. As a side note, Hulu, for those of you who have Hulu, they're coming out with a mini-series called The Looming Tower. And the book is called The Looming Tower by Robin Wright. It's a classic, probably the best book out there. But Hulu's coming up with a mini-series. It's got Jeff Daniels in it, who's one of my favorite actors. But that's coming out, and that might be just a good adjunct to this lesson as well. So that's be on the lookout for it. And also, hint, hint, stomp, stomp, be on the lookout for this on the final. This dynamic of the road to 9/11, the long versus short term. And then terrorism finance, again, you read the Napolini article, or you saw the Napolini video. I think the quote from there is that terrorists are fundraisers that occasionally kill people. And that's true. A lot of the time is done fundraising. And when we talk about next week, when groups are successful and not, groups like Hezbollah are successful because they actually don't have to do fundraising because they have state sponsors. Hamas has state sponsors. The money is there, so they don't have to engage in the criminal activity that Napolini articulates, or the criminal activity that ISIS had to do for the last couple of years, which led a lot of these populations to sour on ISIS. And we talk about terrorism and Terrorism Incorporated, that article that I sent out. Again, just consider those dynamics of payment as we go study these further terrorist organizations next week. So week 4 preview, terrorist adaptation. So I hand out a RAND article, or it's in your folder. It's 200 something pages. Don't read that whole thing. What I want you to do, and please acknowledge this when you acknowledge this YouTube. I want you to read the intro and the conclusion, and then choose one of the groups that is covered in the RAND article. Either Shinrikyo, Jemaah Islamiyah, Hezbollah, the PIRA, and the Earth Liberation Front. So there's five articles in depth. Choose one of those articles. Watch the ISIS PBS Frontline that's in your folder, and then do a compare and contrast. What did ISIS learn, or what did ISIS take away, what were the comparative points, what were their contrasting points between ISIS and whatever group you choose? And then why did each group succeed or fail? Hezbollah has been around for 30, 40 years almost. And they're a political entity. Hamas has been around for 30 plus years. They're now a political entity. The IRA, as you saw in your video with John McGann two lessons ago, they transferred from a terrorist organization to a political entity. While others, Shinrikyo, Sikh separatism, are in the dustbin of history. Why? What were those variables that led to success? What are those variables that are led to failure? And again, ISIS right now, because you're going to compare to ISIS, I could say at this point in February or almost February 2018 has failed. They were made all news 4 years ago, but for reasons that I want you to think through, they're essentially failed as a terrorist organization. Or have they? You can argue with me otherwise. But yeah, those are just points I want you to consider as you're doing the readings. And then WMD Terrorism. So I added this section in the course because I grew up with the Iraq War. I'm old enough to remember the run up to the Iraq War, and I'm sure several of you are. But as I get older and my cohorts get younger, the Iraq War will go into memory, or at least the run up to the Iraq War will go into memory, and it shouldn't. We went into a war in Iraq under false pretenses. I know there's been a lot of arguments in hindsight saying we went after democracy, we went after Al Qaeda, we went after a brutal dictator, but we went into Iraq because we thought there was going to be WMD there, and we thought Saddam Hussein may or may not give WMD to terrorists and cause a 9/11 times 1,000. So that's one thing. So that's why I put it on, and I believe we went into Iraq because not enough people in our government, in our media, and not enough politicians understood WMD, the issues around WMD. Even in my day job, when I was at DITRA, people would spend hundreds of millions of dollars on projects, and it would just be, the answer is, why are we spending this money? It would be, oh, WMD, because it's WMD, because it can cause a lot of casualties. But they really didn't provide the analysis behind it, and we would just shovel money at certain projects. So that's why I signed this project, or this topic. And I want you to look at WMD issues with scrutiny. So you have the readings, the CNAS Om Shinrikyo article, excellent article on why Om Shinrikyo conducted, or how it conducted its sarin attack back in 1995. Some of you who are old enough might remember that. And then I saw in the movie Dirty War. It's an HBO movie. It's out there on YouTube. You don't have to buy it. So it's the HBO Dirty War. There's other versions out there, and that's about a WMD attack. I was hesitant at giving a movie as part of a graduate course, but I think this movie is so spot on and so well scenario driven that I think it's worthy of inclusion. So obviously you have the lectures and the case studies, Om Shinrikyo and the Rajneeshis, which are the two WMD case studies that you will see about in the lecture. And then discussion will be simple. I want you to ask, Om Shinrikyo was able to conduct a WMD attack, pretty significant one, in 1995, while Al Qaeda has not. And the question is, why? Why was Om successful and Al Qaeda not? And I want you to think about those as you're going through the readings and discussions for this week. So I look forward to reading your papers, and if there's questions or issues, please let me know.